Happy International Women's Day. So today, March the 7th, marks International Women's Day at the UN, and I'd just like to share a few reflections on that. I strongly support the idea. I think it's a good idea to help promote awareness of women's rights around the world, as well as just generally celebrating women. I love women. That probably sounds like something that a heterosexual man would say, but all joking aside, in all seriousness, I do love women. I would hate the idea of a world without women, and I really think that it's great that we have gender diversity. Men and women are different, and they always will be. But the issue should always be about equality, different but equal. There is absolutely a lot of areas whereby women still suffer serious issues, and I think a day like this, International Women's Day, can be a good opportunity to sort of raise those issues. So some of the ones I can think of, there's a lot I can think of, but just off the top of my head, there's issues, for example, with pay gaps. I think the logic is quite simple. If a woman does the same work as a man, she should be paid the same. That seems fair to me. And there's a lot of violence against women in this world. There's a lot of sexual violence against women in this world. That's indisputable. Now, I would say to a lot of my fellow men out there, when you look at your mothers, your sisters, female friends, girlfriends, try imagining what that must be like. Try imagining they were a victim of any of these things. And that then shows, I think, like for me, sort of thinking about anyone I care about being a victim of something like that makes me very uncomfortable. But this does exist in this world. I want to make this a positive outlook video, so I don't want to all talk about the negative things. It's also up to talk about many of the achievements women have and so on. But for now, I just focus on women's rights issues. Rape and sexual violence on far too many occasions are justified, and things like, for example, oh, she wore a skirt that's too short, that sort of thing. There's never ever an excuse for hurting a woman in that sort of way, or for violating a woman. You know, any self-respecting man could have self-restraint and realise that no woman wants to be raped. I've made other videos about where rape may be a grey area, for example, if someone is too drunk to remember, things like that. But generally, that doesn't change the fact that rape is a very serious issue, and it does impact far too many women. Not just rape, also sexual harassment, which I count as a form of bullying. It's a controlling sort of behaviour. It must be quite intimidating at times, and you just need to have a world where that doesn't exist. Unfortunately, I'm not so naive to think that all these problems can change overnight, and a lot of the time it's not just about legislation, it's also about changing attitudes, which is also very important. And in too many cultures there's this idea that women bring it on themselves. I mean, in the most extreme situations you have women being executed because they have been victims of rape, and they're accused of adultery. It's just savage beyond measure, and when I think of things like that, it makes my blood boil with indignation, but also it's so surreal and alien to my line of thinking. I know what happens, but it's just barbaric. I do think it's important to speak out on women's rights, even in culturally sensitive situations, i.e. if a certain group of people might get offended by that. It's important to just raise these issues and not be accused of racism or cultural insensitivity for doing so. I've always said human rights is paramount, and women's rights are 50% of human rights, so to be culturally sensitive on these things is just ridiculous. It is unfortunately true that in many parts of the world women do suffer unfair discrimination. In Saudi Arabia, a woman risks jail time if she even dares to demonstrate for her right to drive. That's disgraceful in the 21st century, especially in a wealthy country like Saudi Arabia that has world-class healthcare, that can build skyscrapers, etc. And yet they have this bizarre attitude towards women driving. There's a lot of other areas that affect women. In some war zones, rape is actually used as a weapon of war, which is disgraceful. For example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In many situations, women are victims of people trafficking, women and young girls. As a man, I believe I do have a duty to speak up on women's rights, and I try to. I'm not a feminist, I'm not a misandrist either. not misandrist, masculist. I believe in human rights generally, but I'm quite old-fashioned in the sense that I do feel rather protective of my female friends. Protective not in an overbearing way, but in a sense of my male impulse is to want to make sure that they're okay. So for example, if I have a female friend walking home at night, I'd either accompany her or make sure she got a taxi. I like to check if she's okay. That's just the way I am. I'm old-fashioned in that sense. I think in many parts of the world things have hugely improved for women, and that's something to be celebrated. Also, we live in a world now where there's an increasing number of female leaders. That's progressive. I've always said that someone's politics has no connection with their gender, and that's very true, because women leaders can be socialist, conservative, left-wing, right-wing, and it's not necessarily a political issue, rather it's about equal opportunity. And likewise, it's not true to say, oh, just because someone is a woman leader, she's necessarily going to be a good leader. There's examples of corrupt female leaders and women leaders who have used militaristic approaches to solve problems. So I don't entirely agree with Ted Turner from CNN that if the world was run by women it would be all better. Not necessarily true. But the issue is about opportunity, and just thinking off the top of my head now, we have a lot of major countries are now led by women. Brazil, Dilma Rousseff. Germany, Angela Merkel. Thailand, although she's under a lot of pressure to resign, Yingluck Shinawatra. South Korea, Park Geun-hye. And even though I'm not a conservative, I have to say I have a lot of respect for her as a leader. She's been very diplomatic in terms of the Kargil Threats issued by North Korea. She showed herself to be a real statesperson, and I'd say of all world leaders out there right now, I can't claim to be an expert. I know people say her father was a dictator, but I think it's wrong to judge her on who her father was. Judge her on her, and what her policies are. I think overall she's a pretty good leader. I get a good vibe from President Park in South Korea. And there's other examples in other parts of the world. So there is definitely progress going on in terms of opportunity for women in politics. There is still a long way to go, and there's still countries whereby, let's just be honest about it, it is hard for women to get the same sort of opportunities as men. I still think that so-called positive discrimination is wrong. So recently, I think it was Radio 4 had a little experiment whereby they just banned male DJs for a week and just solely allowed women. I think that's a completely wrong approach. Not only does it discriminate against men by saying for 5 days you're not allowed to broadcast, but whatever the intentions are, I think that approach is wrong. I just don't think it's the right method to go about it, because it treats women like a charity case. Let's not forget women are half of humanity. They're not a minority. But without women, you have no life. So women need to be... I guess what I'm trying to do in this video is just get in as much information as possible. That's why I'm speaking fast, and just a lot of things are coming to my mind. But basically, I'll just round this off because I can't really cover everything anyway. I love women. I couldn't imagine being in a world without women. I see women as my sisters in humanity. Do I always agree with individual women? Of course not. But generally, I couldn't live in a world without women. Women are life givers. Of course it's true you need men as well to conceive, but women are life givers, and that's why when men often hear this about, oh, you have to respect women, I can understand where that comes from. I can. Of course women should respect men as well, it's about mutual respect. But this is International Women's Day, so I, as a man, I'm just saying, I strongly support women's rights. I love women, and thank you for watching the video. Happy Women's Day.